Hey guys, welcome to the session on Coffee with Prabh. And today we have Mr. Gopi K. Gopi is running his own YouTube channel and he do lot of videos on app security and all that. And he also having a 15 plus year of experience in AppSec and DevSecOps. As based on the feedback, as based on the suggestion and demand from the subscribers and my customers and the viewers, we want a session on DevSecOps, and here we have a session on DevSecOps. I will assure you one thing: this session will be a complete hands-on from the conceptual point of view, and it also give a great visibility, a good visibility to the people who want to know how DevSecOps basically works in the organization. It is really honor for us to have Mr. Gopi. Mr. Gopi, thank you for coming for this particular show with Prabh. So Gopi, before we going to discuss the today's session, I would like to understand one thing: what make you to go in a DevSecOps, or what make you to go in AppSec and all that? As we have a multiple, options, we have a multiple opportunities and all that. Why DevSecOps? Why app security? Why not something else?
Okay. Yes. So most of the time, the people are preferring the DevOps methodology, right? So to achieve the to save the time execution time, then the continuous deployment, continuous integration. So we need more automations. So most of the people they integrated the DevOps. So once we recommend the DevSecOps methodology or DevSecOps process, it will be easy for them to incorporate the DevSecOps practices with the existing DevOps pipeline. So this is what the current market trend and the requirement. Right? So this is the motive I started in the DevSecOps
Great.
practices.
Great. So I will make you the host rights. I will give you the host rights, and by that, if you wish to share the screen and drive the presentations, okay. Over to you, Gopi. Can you just quickly drive through about what is DevSecOps, what is DevOps, why it is important? Thank you.
Sure, Prabh. Thank you. Okay. In this section, we can talk about the introduction and overview about the DevSecOps. So agenda-wise, we prepared like this. So agenda overview and the introduction about the DevSecOps, CI/CD pipeline and the tools list, which is required for DevOps as well as the DevSecOps, both the aspects. Then security activities and tools, sample architecture of the DevSecOps, implementation, how we need to implement the DevSecOps, best practices in DevSecOps, and benefit of the DevSecOps. So these aspects we can discuss in this session.
Great.
Okay, first overview. What is DevSecOps? We know DevSecOps nothing but development security operations, right? The security activities we need to incorporate with the development phases as well as the operations phases in the DevOps methodology. That is what the DevSecOps practices will describe the details. So basically, it's a process and approach to incorporate the security activities across the DevOps phases. And again, it is a process and approaches to automate the security activities and implement the security automations in the CI/CD pipeline stages. So these automations and approaches, it includes the security compliance, security monitoring, security dashboard, security testing, etc.
But but
Okay.
but Gopi, I want to understand one thing. When we say DevOps, okay, why we need DevOps? And why we have SDLC and all that, so why we need DevOps when we already having a traditional SDLC? We're happy with that SDLC and all that. What is the reason for that?
Okay. Yeah. So in the DevOps, it is an integrated methodology for the development team as well as the operations team, so that it will be very agility to exchange the any information or solution or any problem statements practically. So this is the right approach to achieve that sort of agility, Prab. That is one thing. And it is an integrated fashion of the activities. So it will be useful to reduce the timeline of the execution. So this is what we can achieve in the DevOps.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the DevSecOps development security operations, the security activities we can incorporate with the development phases as well as the operation phases. So it is a process and approaches to incorporate the security activities across the DevOps phases. The second, again, it is a process and approach to automate the security activities and implement in CI/CD pipeline. So these automations, it should cover the security compliance aspect, security monitoring, dashboard, security testing, the end-to-end activities. So how we need to implement the DevOps practices, SecOps practices with the DevOps pipeline. So first we need to understand the security activities which is required for our environment, like application development or product development. We need to understand that, and we need to try to automate and using a required tools, security tools, and we need to integrate as part of our CI/CD pipeline. So this is what the approach we need to follow when we want to integrate the DevOps practices in our development life cycle. Okay, again, where we need to follow the DevOps practices. Uh, Suppose if we are following the DevOps methodology, any of the product development like web application, API based application development, mobile application, embedded devices, IoT solutions, cloud based solutions. So we can follow the DevSecOps practices and we can integrate these practices with the existing DevOps pipeline. This is applicable for new product development as well as the existing product development. That also one of the important point. Then all domain, we have multiple domains we are working sometimes, right? Like banking, fintech, medical, healthcare, telecommunication, automotive, ICS, home automation, e-commerce, retail application, so public portals. So they have multiple domains. When we develop these applications using a DevOps methodology, we can easily integrate the DevSecOps practices. We can achieve the end-to-end security. So that aspects we can discuss more in this session.
Great.
Yeah. So this is the overview, high-level overview about the DevOps. We have different phases or stages, right? One is like a plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, operate. So the high-level activities and which tools we will use in each phase to execute the DevOps activities. At a high level, we can see definitely there will be multiple activities and tools. At a high level, for reference model purpose, I given only few of the activities and the tools. Activities aspect, suppose if we take the plan phase, their product requirements, a project plan, HLD, high level design, low level design, if required, we will do in the planning stage. So there, what tool majorly we will use for project plan? Tools we will use internally using based on our organization process, right? So under Jira, we will use to create the requirements, then user stories of the requirements. We will use most of the time Jira or equivalent tool. This is what we will execute. The planning stage activities. Once we come to the coding phase activity, there the component selection, third-party component selection we will do for our application or solution. Then the coding implementation we will do unit test, pre-commit test checks we will do. Then we will commit into the repository like GitLab or Bitbucket, any of the repository. The tools aspect, again, the development IDE, mostly Eclipse, Visual Studio, IntelliJ, Git, we will use code scanning plugins as part of our plugins, JUnit. So these tools we will use to execute the activity. Then the build phase, here the CI/CD pipeline stages we will implement. We will configure the CI/CD pipeline stages and we will implement the stages, right? So here we will do the code scan, code quality aspects, all the aspects we will verify, and finally we will make the build in the pipeline. So tools aspect again, the Maven tool we will use for build maker, Gradle, Maven or Gradle, Jenkins, or multiple types of pipeline tools are there. Example I given the Jenkins. Okay, this is what we will do in the build phase. Once we come to the build to test, so in the testing phase, there we will do the automated functional test, performance test, regression test. So multiple types of test we will do. Majorly, we will use the Selenium, JMeter, Robot Framework, other tools also we will use to execute the activities. Then release phase, a software release, compliance checks if required, we will do software gateway we will use as a tool, and we will release the artifact or binary to the end users. Deployment, here we will use the like infrastructure as a code deployment practices or manual deployment practices. Here we will use the tools like Docker, Chef, Ansible, other tools also we will use. Then operating phase, here we will do the operation activities, like operation activities tools we will use it here. Then monitoring phase, again the log monitoring we will do, example the Splunk, Nagios, these tools we will do. So this is what we approaching with the DevOps pipeline. This is the high level activities we are doing. Accordingly, once we come to the DevSecOps practices, so here also the stages or phases will be same. Only the activities and the tools required automations we need to incorporate as part of our DevOps. So that is why we call it as DevSecOps practices. Right? Example again, if we see the plan phase, here we have the security requirements. We need to consider privacy requirements based on our GDPR. We need to consider that. Then architecture design guidelines, threat model, risk assessment, privacy impact assessment, and the controls we need to consider, and we need to execute the security activities in the planning stage itself. Again, the tools aspect here, we will use the threat model tools like MS threat model tool, OWASP threat dragon. We will use these tools, and we will execute the threat model. And the security standards, reference standards also we have like NIST, OWASP, top 10, SANS, CWE, CVE. So based on these practices, we will create the requirements or threat model, security controls we will do, and we will incorporate these activities with our existing planning phase.
So my question is basically, Shiva, like who does these activities when it comes to the standards selections and security architecture? So is it done by the AppSec guys, or they will involve the security architect to do these activities? Because not necessarily
Yes.
every company have a same budget and all that. So what is your
Yeah.
perspective on
Yes,
this? Yeah.
sure. So here, this is logical phase activities. No, mostly the architect, security managers will handle. He will handle these activities. So mostly the AppSec guys, they may involve in the coding phase, testing, build phase. They may involve in the dynamic. Once we come to the dynamic stage, so their work will start. Here, this is logical phase activity. Mostly architect and the security managers are responsible. Yes, the budget, sometimes we will not get enough budget from our end users. So that case, so these how we practically we are approaching. No? So these are all the activities we are not considering. So that risk also clearly we will mention in the risk assessment sheet. We will get required approvals. Based on the approvals, whatever the priority activities they want, we will focus only on that. Prabh.
So it
Yeah.
depending upon the project, it depending upon the things and all that. Great.
Yes.
So any
Yes.
challenge you face, Gopi, any challenge you face basically when you involved in the plan phase and all that?
Sometimes the requirements clarity will not give by the customer what standards we need to follow, what GDPR guidelines we need to follow. So that getting that inputs, it's very difficult from the end users. So that that is the challenge I face.
So how you overcome that? Because I'm sure this video will be watched by a lot of business team and AppSec and all that. So your feedback is your inputs will be highly informative. That okay, how you basically how we overcome this particular things.
Yes. So mostly we will try to get the required details from the end users. Sometimes if we are unable to get we can recommend whatever the best practices we are following in our organization. Internally, every organization have the best practices for security, right? So that practices we will present and we will propose them, and accordingly we will execute the activities of Prem.
Excellent, excellent, great. So
Yeah.
do you like no? Do we need to create any kind of a checklist for all this architect design, or it is completely depending upon how business basically works? So what exactly it is?
Yes. So internally, we have the checklist for each item. Example, the security requirements, we have separate checklist, and privacy impact assessment, privacy requirements, we have separate checklist. Architecture details, how we need to get. So each activity we have separate checklist. Accordingly, we will approach the end users.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. Once we come to the coding phase, so here we need to create the secure coding guidelines so that each guidelines developers can follow, they can implement in their coding implementation. Once the code implementation is completed, we can recommend to integrate the plugins like we have the pre-commit plugins as part of their IDE. The security plugins we can provide, example the Sonar plugins, Sneak plugins. We can integrate with that IDE before committing the code in the developer machines itself. We can run some dry run test, and we can identify any if they have any critical issues in the source code. So that approach we are following in the coding phase. So these practices we need to follow in the DevSecOps environment also.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So the standards again was secure coding standards. We have CSET, So there have multiple standards and best practices to achieve the secure coding we have. We will follow and we will execute the activities. And the tools, again, the development IDE, Sonar plugins, and other tools also, they have plugins. We will integrate as part of our development IDE. We will scan the code.
So as we saying the Sonar Cube and all that, what is the purpose of the Sonar Cube too? Like, I heard about a lot of about Sonar Cube and all that. So I'm sure some of the folks are here completely new to the development and all that, and they want to know this. So what
Fine.
is the Sonar Cube and all about?
Sure. So basically, Sonar Cube is a code quality tool. Suppose
Okay.
if we have source code, we can scan and identify the static level issues. Static means SAST, we call it as a static application security test. So before making the build, before deploying the build in the runtime environment, in the static stage itself, suppose assume that if we have some hard-coded credentials or hard-coded tokens, keys, if we mistakenly if we left in the source code, these type of issues we can identify using the Sonar plugins. Also, Sneak also one of the great tool. We can detect that sort of static level issues, and we can identify before going to the build stage.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is what the coding related activities and practices we are following. Once we come to the build phase, so there we have the activities like again we need to create the stages in the pipeline itself, like static application security test, software composition analysis, software bill of materials report, then build. Once build is created, the integrity also we need to verify, right? So software signing, we need to make it properly. So these activities also as part of our pipeline, we are implementing these stages, and we are doing the practices here. Again, the standards, DevOps practices, DevSecOps practices, any methodology we can refer and we can use that practices. Again,
Okay.
tools, here also Sonar we can integrate with the CI/CD. Sneak also we can integrate with CI/CD. Other tools also like Veracode, HP45. So multiple tools are available. So record tools we will integrate as part of our CI/CD, and we will do the static application security test. Yeah. So once the code is built, then we will deploy and we will execute the dynamic. So, example, the containerized image scan, then dynamic test, penetration test, first test. So, multiple security related tests we have here. If required, we can automate these activities, certain activities also, and we can integrate as part of our pipeline. So that sample reference architecture details also I will show in the next coming slides. So these stages also we can create. And again, the standards aspects, we have the CAS benchmark over top 10 SANS CWE. So based on these guidelines only, the test activities we will do, right? Then the tools, Sneak, KubeHunter, KubeBench, KubeAudit, if it is Kubernetes-based environment, so these tools we will use. Then again, the bug suit, Nessus, Qualys, Synopsys. So multiple tools are there to achieve these activities. The required tools we can implement and we can execute the testing activities.
Excellent.
Okay.
And so any challenge we are facing in this particular environment, like when we're doing, because there is a one concept we called here is application test, pen test, first test. So can you just share some highlight on the fuzzing? What is
Yes.
fuzzing and all that? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fuzzing, mostly the payload. Mostly we will dump the all possible payload to the target system, and
Mm,
we will analyze the response, how the target system is behaving.
mm,
So, example, again, the payload means, suppose assume that we have some fields like username, password. So there different combinations like without any letter, with single letter, with single digit, with all the combination of the letter. So all the possible payload we will inject from minimum to maximum, all the possibility of payloads, and we will see the server's response if they are facing any issues based on the payload. This is one scenario for application level. Again, if we go to the embedded level, we have the embedded interfaces like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, USB, CAN interface, serial port interface. So there, again, all possible data payload. Just example, assume that we have the 4-bit of data. 4-bit means if we do the combinations 0000 to 1111, right? So all the combinations payload we will create, and we will send it to the interface. That may be the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or any of the embedded device.
great.
So based on that value, if the device hardware or stack, protocol stack, or any SDK, if they get some issues, we faced some of the SDK crashed due to the first test. So that sort of issue also we face, mostly in the embedded devices, embedded based devices. So this is what the different payload, different combinations we will do in the test. The penetration test, mostly this will focus on the business logic, data flow, workflow, design and architectural related issues. Example, the privilege escalations attack, broken access controls, then the session management mostly. So these type of runtime issues we can identify in the penetration test stage.
Okay.
So static, again, we saw in the build phase static test and all, right? So there the code is in the static state. It won't deployed in the runtime, right? So runtime static issues we can achieve using the code scanning tools. Runtime issues we need to approach the pen test or first test or any dynamic test, and we need to identify the runtime issues. Yeah. So
Great.
this is what the challenge aspects here. The more product, very in-depth level of test we need to do, preparing the test cases, test scenarios, making the payload. So this will be the challenge. Yeah, based on the security standards, we can create that test scenarios, test cases, and all, and we can achieve that. Also, the some of the stages also we implemented as part of our CI/CD. That details also we have in the coming slides. I will show more details on that.
Great.
Okay, release and deploy. Here, the compliance, security compliance checks, we will do secure configurations, hardening, dashboard integration. These we will do as part of our DevSecOps practices. The standards like HIPAA, PCI DSS, based on our data type, we can follow the GDPR and regulatory standards, and we can achieve the compliance requirements.
Mhm.
Then operations phase. Here the data handling, backup, restoration, this aspect, how securely we are handling, whether we implementing the backup files, proper integrity checks, or we are making the digital side. So these aspects we will do the activities in the operate phase. Then a monitoring phase, again, mostly the SOC operations, VA activities, if required, penetration testing, purple teaming activities. So there have multiple types of activities in the monitoring stage also. Even security audit, external audit. So all the activities we will do in the monitoring stage. So in the DevOps practices, each stage of the activities we need to execute, and wherever the automations is required, we can implement the automations, and we can integrate with the CI/CD pipeline. So this is the best practices we need to follow when we implement the DevSecOps practices.
Excellent. Excellent. It was a great insight.
Yeah, sure. So this is one of the sample architecture for DevSecOps. Assume that we have the existing DevOps pipeline. So there will be one development missions,
So,
user
so,
mission.
so, Gopi, sorry to interrupt here. Is it okay? Can we discuss from very basics with this diagram, like how the code comes, how we deploy,
Okay,
test, and all that. So it will be a good insight for the people who new to the area.
sure, Prabh. Yeah. So in the traditional DevOps environment, so there will be users missions, developer users missions. Once the code is completed, they will commit to the repository. Example, here we given the GitLab is one of the repository.
Mm.
So there have multiple repository like GitLab, Bitbucket, AWS have own repository, Azure have one repository like that. So for understanding purpose, I given GitLab is one of the repository. So once we commit the code, the repository, it will store the source code. Okay, here the pipeline server, we have Jenkins pipeline server.
Mm.
Even pipeline also multiple types of servers we have. For example, I given just basic understanding purpose. The Jenkins is one of the pipeline. Here we can create the jobs. Suppose
So,
assume
so,
that
so
it,
when I say pipeline, what is pipeline?
okay. Here we can, this is integration tools, right? So each tools we can register with the pipeline, and we can make the job when the code scan should happen, when the build should create, and once the build is created, when they want to do the infrastructure and continuous deployment or infrastructure as a code. So these jobs and all centrally we can monitor using our pipeline server,
Okay.
so here we, if required, the later I will give the practical demo also how we need to create the pipeline jobs and how we need to execute that aspects we can. Okay. So here the pipeline job we will create. Suppose assume that developer committed the code, and we can create the job to scan the source code. Once the source code scan is completed, these pipeline stages we can implement multiple types of pipeline stages. Example, the Sonar Cube plugins we can integrate. The Sonar Cube, assume that the Sonar Cube is installed in the separate server. We can integrate this server with pipeline. When code is committed, no, we can
Mm.
create the job. Based on the job details, the Sonar scan will run, and once the code quality is passed, this tool will give the result as passed. The code quality checks also we can create. That we can discuss later. So like that, each stage we can create. Example, if we want another tools like Snyk, if we want to separate stage, we can use this. We can implement this stage in the pipeline, and we can execute the Snyk tool scan also. Then detect secret is another tool. We can identify the any hard coded or any token token IDs related issues. We can scan and we can execute this type of stage also. We can implement. Then dependency tracker. We have SCA, software composition analysis, right? That dependency track tool we can use. So we can create.
What is this SCA, software composition analysis? Because I heard about lot of things about
Yeah.
open source softwares and all that. So what is
Yes.
your thought on that? Yeah.
Fine. Yes, Prabh. Suppose when we develop any of the product or application, so we will use multiple vendors, open source tools like that may be that may be example the Apache server, database server, some libraries, third-party libraries, JR, some jar files, war files. So these ready-made files, that means third-party components we will use and we will create our applications, right? So each component there will be vendor version details. Based on the versions, we can track whether that component have any known vulnerabilities from the CVE or some other portals, known vulnerabilities. So to achieve that activities, we need a tool. We need to scan our binary and we need to analyze and we need to get the third-party components or binaries list with versions. Suppose if the versions have vulnerabilities, we can analyze and we can create the report for the identified vulnerabilities. So that stage, that activity, we call it as SCA, software composition analysis.
Okay.
Here, dependency track is one of the tool. It will give the SCA report. We can use it easily, dependency tracker tool. So if required, we can implement one stage for SCA also. Software bill of materials BOM. Again, we can create, if required, we can create the report and we can make one more stage in our pipeline, so that based on the pipeline configuration, the SBOM we can create and we can download the report. Once the static stage activities are completed, then we can call to the build maker like Maven Gradle, so that it will build and it will create the package or artifactory.
Okay.
Once the artifactory is completed, we need to sign digitally. We need to sign so that even a binary also we can tamper and we can modify something, right? So digital signing is one of the controls we can follow. So here we call it as code signing or software signing,
Code
something
signing
like
and
that.
all for authenticity
Yeah.
and integrity of the code. Yeah.
Yes. So once it is completed, again, if it is Kubernetes environment, Trevi we can scan the Docker image, containerized image. Once the deployment is completed using infrastructure as a code or continuous deployment methodology, we can execute the SAST. So these stages we can create as part of our CI/CD pipeline server.
Okay.
Mostly these stages only for security activities. So mostly the traditional DevOps, few of the stages only they will follow. They won't follow all these stages. When we want to achieve the end-to-end security, we need to implement these type of stages and we need to execute the activities. So in addition that, we have other stages also. If required, we can integrate. Example, the Jira we can integrate with the pipeline, and requirements we can monitor how many requirements implemented, how many requirements are not implemented. That details we can do. Then OWASP Threat Dragon tool. This is OWASP Threat Dragon tool. This tool also will provide support to integrate with the CI/CD pipeline. The threat model, risk assessment, and all we can use this tool. We can integrate with pipeline and we can monitor that. Again, the AWS artifact. So there have multiple tools for security compliance and all. We can use these tools and we can implement. Once the image is created, assume that if it is containerized image and it is deployed in the runtime, so Kubernetes related scan also we can do, like a Kubunter, Kubebench, Kubeaudit. So multiple tools are there. Can integrate job for these tools also. We can execute
And
the test.
mostly it is happen in the case of when the application is developed already. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So when you're talking about the staging, we use this word staging always. Staging, stacking. Sorry, not stacking. Stacking. So what is stacking all about? Like we can see the pipeline stacking. We say additional pipeline stacking. So what do you mean stacking?
Okay. Staging here, we call it as multiple types of activities which is
Okay.
implemented in the CI/CD pipeline.
Okay. Okay.
Example, Sonar Cube scan is one of the
Hmm.
stage.
Hmm.
Slick scan is another stage. Third, direct secret scan is stage. These stages we will implement in the CI/CD pipeline.
Understood. Clear.
Yeah. So we have like one trust tools that report also sometimes if required we can integrate with pipeline and we can see our privacy impact assessment and its controls also we can monitor. So in addition that the overall security dashboard, how many issues in each stage we may identify issues, how many issues are fixed, how many issues are open, how many issues are residual risk, all this the overall dashboard also we can integrate with the CI/CD pipeline and we can monitor that. So this is what the multiple jobs and multiple stages we need to implement as part of our CI/CD for the security activities.
That's great.
Yeah.
It is basically a good insight you gave about the process and all that. And I never seen such kind of a sequence. I always get confused in the content part how this integration happened. And thanks Gopi for sharing this part of insight. So okay, so this is basically the architecture of the DevSecOps we have. So then we talk about the testings and everything. So how we carried the testing, what type of testing we had in this approach?
Okay. Here we have two types of testing. One
Hmm.
is a static test. So static test we can do here itself, the sonar, sneak,
Hmm.
dependency tracker. So we can do the
Hmm.
static application security test. Once we come to the dynamic application security test, so there we have one stage for mostly the ZAP proxy we will integrate with the CI/CD pipeline and we can achieve the DAST. Also,
Great,
Veracode is another tool we will integrate and we will do the scan.
great.
Uh, okay, next. The pipeline for SAST and DAST. Suppose if you ask the more details how we need to implement the SAST and the DAST. So this is the flow diagram just for understanding purpose I given. Suppose if we take SAST, first, this is developer mission. If they commit the code, it will store in the repository. Suppose
Hmm.
assume that we need to implement a Sonar Cube stage in the pipeline. So we can configure accordingly. The Sonar Cube is installed in the separate mission or in the same mission. Once the scan is completed, then we can do the code build using Maven or Gradle. So that is why the sequence number I given. One is the first step. Second step, it will store in the GitLab repository. Third step, we need to create the pipelines. To create the pipeline, the authentication, registration, token configurations, job creations, report creations we need to do in the pipeline configuration. Fourth one, we need to install the Sonar Cube and required configurations we need to do under the token creation, token authentication and all we need to do with the Jenkins pipeline. This is the fourth step. Once the scan is completed, the build make we can call the Maven build maker job so that it will build, it will give the artifactory or package.
Okay.
So in the previous slide also, once the artifactory is created using Maven or Gradle build, we can store some of the centralized repository like the JFrog artifactory. From that artifactory also, the automated tool like the software release gateway, it will fetch and it will deliver to the end users. So in every stage, we need to consider the security, how securely we are doing that. So that aspects also we need to think if required. So once the build is created, again, we can publish the artifactory or we can directly publish it to the customer place using our gateway mechanism. Okay, so this is the SAST stage. And the DAST stage, again, here is a static application security test. To execute the test, we need only static code files, so that easily we can fetch from the repository, we can execute the scan and we can complete the scan. But once we come to the dynamic stage, so there the scenario is different. Once the build is created, we need to deploy in the runtime environment. So the runtime environment nothing but here the application server I given. Once assume that the application is running in the runtime, so that the dynamic tools like Zap or Veracode, any tools we can integrate with the pipeline, and we can execute this scan using the URL APIs user with the authentication details. So this is
Okay,
what the SAST and the DAST workflow will be different. So accordingly, we need to make our setup all these aspects ready, and we need to implement the stages for dynamic test also.
that's great.
Okay. So implementation of the DevSecOps, how we need to implement practically. So first, we need to identify whatever security activities are required. Example, you also mentioned sometimes budget approval will not be there to execute end-to-end activities. So that case, what security priority security is required, that we need to analyze, find out to execute that activities, what tools we need to use and how we need to automate with our pipeline. These aspects we can think, and we need to create the staging in our pipeline so that we can implement the activities. We can automate and implement in our pipeline. Okay, the implementation again, implement the CI/CD pipeline first. Initially, some POCs. Once the POC is success, then we can integrate in the production environment and we can execute. Okay, best practices in the DevSecOps. So here, the best practices aspects, the end-to-end security activities we need to consider and we need to execute, maybe in the automated way or manual way. That is practice, we can say. Again, the end-to-end activities from the requirement phase to architecture phase, coding phase, testing phase, and product operations and monitoring phase. All the activities we need to consider, we need to execute that. And implement the CI/CD pipeline stages for security compliance checks also. So we have nowadays in tools to verify the compliance checks. We can integrate with the CI/CD pipeline and we can do that. Implement CI/CD stage for dashboards, so that if we have centralized dashboards, how many activities we executed, how many activities are pending, what security risks are identified, and how many how many risks closed and how many risks opened, all the details we can monitor centralized in the centralized place. Implement quality controls in each stage. So suppose if we identify a certain level of critical number of more high level issues, that is controls also we need to analyze whether this is, can we provide the approvals or can we stop the build, like that decisions we need to follow accordingly. Okay, benefits of the DevSecOps. So the security vulnerabilities we can identify easily in the earlier stage itself, since we are executing all the activities in each phase. Then security checks can be validated in all the layers, so it is easy to achieve zero trust security model. Then shift to left approach, more security test and verification coverage we can achieve easily. Products can achieve end-to-end security. Products can other any regulatory standards, security compliance we can achieve easily. Also, low-cost solutions. If required, the more open source tools we have, we can use the tools. We can automate. So low-cost solutions also, if required, we can make, and it saves time also. So more automations we are considering. So it saves time also. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a great insight, Gopi, where you have given the exposure about the tools that is used in every stage and the quick walkthrough about the process. So this is something a surprise one, which I want to ask you. If someone is applying for a job in DevSecOps and all that, what skill he's required? And do you
Okay.
recommend any
Yeah.
resources that he should refer to prepare for DevSecOps fields and all that? So how to start, how to make a career in DevSecOps?
Okay. Yeah, so first he need to understand, he need to familiar on the security standards, the end-to-end activities. So the customer's requirements dynamically they may vary. Sometimes they need DevOps automation for the requirements phase. Some customers they may ask a testing phase activity they want as part of the pipeline. So dynamically he need to understand all the end-to-end security aspects and basic configuration on the DevOps, how the DevOps environment is working, the authentication, registrations, and how it is happening, pipeline server to get repositories or other servers. So these DevOps knowledge also they need to get thoroughly.
That's great. I'm saying that when you're talking about DevOps and all that, what is basically like, any resources do you recommend? Any videos do you recommend for the DevSecOps and
Yes,
all that? Yeah.
yeah, sure, yes. Okay. Yeah, so that details I need to get and update you
Okay,
later.
no issues. So you can share the URL so I can basically, amend that in the requirement. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really great. So any last minute point you would like to suggest? Any last pointer you would like to share with the aspirants who making a career in DevSecOps?
Okay. Yeah, yes, Prabh. So again, the security standards, the end-to-end security activities, they need to understand the concepts and the testing phase activities. We have tools like for SAST, DAST, right? So the tools knowledge they need to get thoroughly. They need to understand how to scan and how to generate the report, how to analyze the report. Suppose if they want to fix that issues, what recommendations he can provide. So all these aspects you need to get expertise. This experience and the expertise will help easily to implement in the DevSecOps practices in any of the environment.
Great, great. That's really great. So when we're talking about the requirement of DevSecOps, so what are the common tools we should focus on when you're basically going for the DevSecOps and all that?
Okay. First, we can focus on the testing phase activities.
Hmm.
Again, testing phase, we have two types of test we saw. One is a SAST, static test, dynamic test.
Hmm.
So, static test, mostly the SonarQube open source, people may prefer to integrate that SonarQube plugins with the CI/CD pipeline. Then the SCA, software composition analysis, another area. We need to consider that and build making and the code signing tools also we need to understand. Once we come to the dynamic test area, so there the web application scan, API scan, here mostly the Zap proxy, burp suite, Veracode. So these type of tools they can get expertise and practically they can do the activities so that it will be easy how they can automate and integrate with the CI/CD pipeline. So the testing phase activities they can focus. Most of the requirements are coming from the testing phase only to implement the DevSecOps practices.
That's
Um,
really great. That's really
yeah,
great. So team, do you let me know that okay, shall we disturb again Gopi for the another video? Because I got a great insight about the DevSecOps and all that. And I believe Gopi, you will be available for the further session with me on the coffee series with Prabh to discuss more about the application security topics and all that.
sure, Prem. I am
So,
interested.
so
Yeah,
do let me know, team, in a comment box, which video shall I record again with Gopi and what kind of a topic, we can able to plan. I'm sure, this session definitely informative, especially the tool part and the product walkthrough that basically give the visibility and all that. Okay. So I'm sure it is a great learning for me because I got a great insight about some areas on DevSecOps, and thanks Gopi. And it is not easy, taking out the time in a weekend and, available for the sessions and all that. And you're doing great job, Gopi, giving back to the community from where you have learned. And, that is how we grow, right? So I'm really thankful, and I'm really honored that okay to have a person like you in this particular session who's sharing his 15 years of experience of the AppSec and DevSecOps.
sure. Thank you, Prem. Yeah,
Same here, Gopi, and thank you so much for your time for this particular session. And team, if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos with Gopi. Stay tuned for more information.